Hey folks, this is Riker, and Last Epoch is no longer an indie darling. They've been acquired by South Korean publisher Krafton. We'll talk about whether you should be worried about that or not, but we've got a packed week in gaming news, so we're also going to talk about the bug that Blizzard finally fixed in Diablo 4. We'll dive into one of the biggest censorship stories in gaming right now. The rabbit hole on this one goes deeper than it initially seemed. We'll also talk about how Ubisoft is blaming Star Wars fatigue for their flop game, and the shocking change that Microsoft is making to its pricing model. Let's break it all down, but first be sure to ring that sub notification bell to be alerted to new Saturday episodes. Starting with some quick Diablo news. Blizzard will be dropping patch 2.3.2 for D4 next week, landing on Tuesday, July 29th. It's mostly a bug fix patch, but the big headline fix, Echo of Lilith, is finally going to be behaving again. That bug where she gets stuck in her first phase if you deal damage to her too quickly? Yeah, they're fixing that. I remember when my group did Echo of Lilith at the start of the season, and we realized we had to slow down and stagger out our damage to stop triggering that bug. So hopefully this fix sticks and doesn't come back next season. Oh, also the weird chat font size bug seems to have been fixed as of I think last week. Now I know some players complain about the Lilith fight in general. Yeah, there's a lot of BS in that fight, but Echo of Lilith isn't a boss that you're meant to farm over and over, so I think it's okay for a once-a-season boss to have some harsh or annoying mechanics. You don't want that on bosses that you're going to be chain farming, but as some kind of a pinnacle challenge, I think it's acceptable. Another topic I've seen brought up in the community, glyph leveling for alts. Like when you make a second or third or fourth character, right? We've spoken before about how some players desperately want a new way to level up glyphs other than just the pit. Now, I personally don't mind doing the pit, but I can agree that having to slowly find one by one every paragon glyph again and then level them all up over again on every character that you make in a season, it can be a bit much. Like in Diablo 3, we had legendary gems, and the redesigned glyph leveling is basically, exactly legendary gems from D3. And legendary gems in D3 were shareable between your characters. In other words, you would get all your glyphs, you would level them up, and then you can put those on your alt characters. Now, you can't fully translate this to Diablo 4 because while there are some glyphs that are shared between classes, like canny, like exploit, every class does have some class-specific glyphs. So the simplest solution here would just be share the glyphs that all have the same name, canny, exploit, and, the class-specific ones like spirit, that doesn't get shared. At least it would be helpful. You can have more elaborate systems to have some ways to translate the class-specific glyphs across class, but, any baseline sharing is an improvement. But how do you folks feel about glyph leveling? Are you cool with it as it is? Would you rather share glyphs? Sound off in the comments. Meanwhile, I released this week a video on the updated meta in Diablo 4, so I revisited my top 10 builds video and class tier lists. There were some significant changes, so if you're still playing Season 9, do check out that video. Alright, moving on to news that is an update to a story we covered last week, when Valve started to remove certain not safe for work games from Steam, and they changed their rules on what kinds of games are allowed on Steam in compliance with requests or demands from their payment processors. In other words, the likes of Visa, MasterCard, and PayPal. At the time, a link had been found between this event and the actions of a lobbying group called Collective Shout, who had previously sent a letter to these payment processors pressuring them to not support adult games that, in short, depicted harm. Well, we've had some updates. First off, the group came out and took explicit credit, so no more need to speculate there. But that's not the only update. Indie game platform itch.io deindexed all of their not safe for work games from its search and browse functions. And if you know anything about itch.io, then you know that's like most of their games. Is that fair? No? The founder of itch.io put out a message explaining that Collective Shout had targeted them and that their payment processors were basically threatening to pull support in the case of non-compliance with removing offending games. Now, you can't blame itch.io here. The ultimatum was basically comply or go out of business because your customers will have no easy way to buy your products. So on a temporary basis, itch.io has delisted all of their not safe for work games while they manually review every game to greenlight the ones that are compliant. And only once this review is done will the non-banned games reappear on the site. They'll also be updating their rules like Valve on what content is allowed on their platform in compliance with their payment processors. Now, a lot of people from gamers to devs who sell via their platform are still pissed at itch.io for reacting so quickly and with no warning. And I'm hearing rumors that GOG will be next, and I bet Patreon will be soon to follow. Now, while Collective Shout may have been the instigator in this case, Visa and MasterCard have been waging a quiet war on adult content for a while now, particularly in Japan. Collective Shout is just a convenient scapegoat for these companies to exercise their power. And while I don't like the idea of governments overruling a business's autonomy to choose to be affiliated with certain kinds of content, I think we've reached a point in our digital borderless, cashless world where digital payment processing is more like a utility than a good or service. Businesses would be crippled. Many people would have great difficulty purchasing things they desire if suddenly Visa, PayPal, and MasterCard just went down all at once. I know there was a case where Visa was implicated in a lawsuit for facilitating payment of illicit materials, and companies, they need to protect themselves against this kind of stuff. I wouldn't want Visa to keep getting, sued over things like this. But I'd rather have laws be put in place that exempts Visa, etc., from being held responsible for this kind of stuff, as long as we also have regulations that prevent them from denying service to anything that is not illegal. Because maybe people don't care about the current games that are being censored out of existence. But once we've opened that door, then who knows? When in the future, one of these companies may decide to ban games that depict certain political opinions. Should Visa and MasterCard really have that power? There's growing support in the US for the Fair Access to Banking Act, which is a bill that would make it illegal for financial service providers to restrict or inhibit any legal transaction. If passed, payment processors won't be able to just decide what legal games or services you're allowed to spend your money on. Now, the story doesn't even end there. Reporter Anna Valens had begun writing articles on Vice's gaming vertical Waypoint concerning the influence of Collective Shout. Those articles were then taken down by the website, just scrubbed. You can still find them on the Internet Archive, but Waypoint tried to erase them. In journalism, this is not common practice. You amend an article with new information, you correct an article that has factual inaccuracies, but you do not remove an article that has been greenlit by an editor. That's censoring journalism. And according to Anna Valens, the articles were allegedly not removed due to direct legal threat, because that's kind of the first thing you think. Rather, they were removed because Vice's parent company was concerned about backlash over a controversial subject matter. In protest of this violation of journalistic integrity, Anna Valens quit, as did her editor, as did some of her coworkers, basically leaving Waypoint with a skeleton crew now. Now, worth noting, one of Valens' articles was titled, "Group Behind Steam Censorship Policies Have Powerful Allies." She had uncovered evidence that Collective Shout had the backing of several prominent anti-porn groups who have all been campaigning in some way or another against NSFW content for some time. And they simply found the abuse angle as the one that would stick. In other words, they've not been successful banning just pornography in general, but okay, pornography with abuse in it, now we're getting somewhere. And if you look into these groups, you see direct government connections. You see some of them received grants from the U.S. Department of Justice and the U.S. Department of State. You see some were led by former U.S. government chiefs. Some have previously gotten U.S. senators and Canadian legislators to introduce bills or otherwise press the government to action. Some of these groups have official United Nations status and have formal channels to engage directly in intergovernmental processes. They all have clear documentable ties to governments or connections to powerful people. So that means we have myriad powerful people pushing morality-based agendas framed as something that everyone can agree with. Yeah, we don't want, child abuse video games. But it is abundantly clear that they are after more than just that. And this is simply a first step. That was an important story for Anna Valens to cover. And it says a lot that Vice then covered it up. Now, on her Twitch stream, Valens expressed afterwards that Vice's owners had previously worried about articles covering sexual or political topics, and the reason was always because they feared it would hurt their Google ranking. I mean, the website is literally called Vice, not Virtue. But this is all part of the new internet, isn't it? The corporate internet, the sanitized internet, where we can't say certain words, we can't talk about certain topics, we can't express certain opinions, because someone's gonna pull your monetization, something's gonna hurt your search ranking, some sponsor won't want to be affiliated with you anymore, and the result is everything has this safe, dull, beige wallpaper over it because everything is getting centralized to a series of websites owned by a smaller series of corporate overlords. I'm old enough to remember when the internet was the Wild West. The way people scroll through TikTok videos these days, I remember when we used to scroll through entire different websites like that. We used to surf the web. We would always be discovering new websites, getting information from different sources, getting different voices, different perspectives, all without fear of being censored for saying something that some faceless corporation considers wrong. Sure, any one of us can still go and make our own website and say whatever we want on our own website. We're not literally being censored, but good luck getting found in 2025 on your own little website. Because if you're not on one of those big corpo websites, you basically don't exist to anyone. All of these corporations are able to indirectly censor us, control what we say, what we hear, what we see, and now also what we buy? At what point is it too much? Moving on to another follow-up story, the Stop Killing Games initiative. They've hit a new milestone, 1.4 million signatures. As a reminder, in the EU, you need to reach 1 million legit signatures for a petition to be examined by the European Commission in a serious capacity by conducting an investigation on the issue and holding a public hearing in the European Parliament about it. 1.4 million basically means that even if a lot of the signatures are from people outside of the EU, or they're repeat signatures, or otherwise just invalid signatures, there should still be enough to pass the 1 million mark. Or at least that would be enough under normal circumstances. This initiative has attracted a lot of attention outside of the EU, and it's also something that concerns gamers, so who knows if someone set up some kind of a bot farm to send in a bunch of fake signatures to get those numbers up. As a reminder, the Stop Killing Games initiative is not about forcing game devs to run their game servers forever, despite what some bad faith actors have tried to lead you to believe in order to turn you against this movement. No, there's nothing unreasonable like that being put forth in this idea. It's not even about applying anything retroactively to existing games. It's just saying, hey, for any future game you make, you need to have an end-of-life plan. What happens when you are no longer able or willing to support the game? Do you have a way to ensure that customers who paid for this game are still able to play it in some way? Either an offline mode, or servers that consumers can run themselves, or maybe direct peer-to-peer multiplayer. And there's no expectation that the game must keep running as it has been running. This comes with an expectation that, especially for games, the experience will be worse than when the devs were supporting it. But hey, at least we can still play the thing that we bought in some form. Moving on to Ubisoft news. Yeah, you know it's going to be good. Ubisoft just released its Q1 financials for the 2025-2026 fiscal year. And it's not looking great. Revenue is down 3.9% compared to last year, and the report flatly states that results came in below expectations. Assassin's Creed Shadows did hit 5 million players and performed in line with expectations, but execs are not exactly celebrating over that. Still though, better than Star Wars Outlaws, am I right? And speaking of, during the Q&A period, the Ubisoft CEO was asked about Outlaws, and he replied, quote, "Outlaws was released at a time when the brand that it belonged to was in a bit of choppy waters." Now, in fairness to him, he also added that the game had a few items that still needed to be polished, but overall he seems to be putting the blame on Star Wars fatigue. Outlaws did release around the same time as Star Wars Acolyte, which probably represents the peak of "I'm done with Star Wars" sentiment. This is after years of bad, or at best mediocre, Disney Star Wars products being shoveled out with a couple of gems. But here's the thing. There still has been success in Star Wars. Andor was brilliant and was a hit. Jedi Fallen Order, Jedi Survivor, these games perform well. If you make a good Star Wars product, it will be a success. The brand isn't tainted as a whole. The only difference is in the past, you can get away with slapping Star Wars on top of anything and you could expect it to be a big financial success. Now, after all the damage the brand has gone through, it no longer carries the same automatic buy prestige that it once did. So God forbid now you need to, make an actually excellent game if you expect excellent sales figures. You can't just coast on the Star Wars brand name. Now, according to Ubisoft insider Tom Henderson on his Insider Gaming podcast, Ubisoft has already scrapped very early plans for a sequel to Star Wars Outlaws. No big surprise, internally the game is considered a failure, sales were underwhelming, the reviews were lukewarm, and Ubisoft's stock even took a hit after the game launched. And there was one last thing of note said in that Ubisoft meeting. The CEO actually said, you can't make this up. This could be an Onion article. It's how banal it is. He actually said that microtransactions in single-player games, quote, "make the player experience more fun because they allow players to personalize their avatars or progress more quickly." Back in my day, if we wanted to progress more quickly, we'd use free cheat codes or trainers. And character personalization, yeah, that was called modding. Alright, moving on to some last Epoch news. We got an earth-shattering announcement this week. 11th Hour Games has been fully acquired by Krafton. The same Krafton behind PUBG, and the same Krafton recently entangled in the whole Subnautica 2 firing and lawsuit circus that we covered in the past 2 weeks. In a post titled "A New Chapter for 11th Hour Games," the studio framed the move as the natural next step in their 7-year journey from a guy in a kitchen with zero funding to a 100-plus person team, and that they would be hiring many roles in the near future. Now, they haven't shared what this means for the roadmap just yet, but they did confirm that Season 3, Beneath Ancient Skies, is launching August 21st, and Season 4 will drop roughly 4 months after that. So in the short term, things are moving along as planned. The community is having mixed reactions to this, and understandably so. I, myself, am ambivalent. First off, I'm happy for Judd, I'm happy for the team. This is a great success for them. It also means they'll be able to afford more staff, they'll be able to output seasons more consistently, they can compete on a more even playing field with the other ARPGs out there. A live service ARPG costs a lot to run in a competitive way, and now they should have the funds to keep going. So for players, this should also mean we can expect more. And if things continue with the same vision and the same values that we've seen from EHG, then this should just be great news all around. But naturally, the game is now owned by Krafton. Krafton can, theoretically, at any time ask EHG to jump, and they could only say how high. And if they don't, then Krafton can just fire everyone and hire other people to run the game. Like how Krafton in the last couple of weeks fired the 3 studio heads of Subnautica 2 and replaced them. They potentially had justified reason for that. We'll find out when the lawsuit is settled, because right now it's a he said, she said, where Krafton says they were slacking off and not doing their job, and they disagree. To add to things in the past, allegedly, once Krafton acquired PUBG and Terra, it didn't take long before microtransactions started ramping up in those games. After all, a publisher acquires a game in order to make money. To make more money than they spent. And while Last Epoch's monetization has been very ethical so far, if Krafton is not seeing enough returns on their investment, well, who knows what they'll do. Had EHG simply sold part of the company, say 40%, while maintaining a controlling stake, then there'd be no concern, at least not on my part. But I imagine this deal would not have happened with Krafton not getting a controlling stake. Ultimately, time will tell. If this ends up being a bad thing, I don't expect anything bad to manifest for at least 6 months, if not a year. For now, there's no need to be doom and gloom. Let's see what the team is able to cook with the extra resources and enjoy the content. But what do you folks think? Is this a necessary step for Last Epoch to grow? Or is it the beginning of the end? Sound off with your thoughts. Then in some Microsoft news. Remember how Microsoft announced a new $80 price point for its games, starting with The Outer Worlds 2? And we collectively said, that's a terrible idea. Well, Microsoft actually agreed with us and has walked back the price hike. The Outer Worlds 2 and future games will launch at $70 instead. Now, I don't expect Microsoft did this out of the goodness of their hearts. I imagine pre-orders for The Outer Worlds 2 must have been abysmal. Don't get me wrong, The Outer Worlds was a great niche AA game, but it wasn't a blockbuster like Elden Ring or Grand Theft Auto. Nintendo can get away with charging $80 for a Mario Kart game, despite us grumbling about it. The Outer Worlds does not have that kind of weight to it. I do have another thought. Microsoft could have been making use of the anchoring effect. They opened with an outrageous price, then backed down to $70. But hey, $70 is still a lot. It just seems reasonable when you compare it to $80. The Outer Worlds 1 cost $40. $70 is still a 75% price hike. Then in some quick no rest for the Wicked news, we've got some juicy updates from a new interview with game director Thomas on the Town Portal podcast. Co-op is about 2 months away. That's fantastic news. And when it lands, it'll come with a new multiplayer hub based in a fortress that's already within Sacrament. I know a lot of people have been waiting for co-op to really dive into this game. And I'm going to end this video by very briefly mentioning a new game that released this week, Hell Clock. It's basically Hades meets Path of Exile, ARPG meets roguelite. I'm loving the game. I released a video about it yesterday. Do check that out to learn more. That video was sponsored, but I'm not sponsored right now to say I think this game is great fun. And that's going to wrap up this video, folks, but do be sure to check out last week's video in which we discussed the secret Diablo 4 meeting in which Blizzard showed us, some of us at least, the future of Diablo 4. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Patreon supporters who make these videos possible. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to join Rikers Raiders for more gaming content.